The royal palace on the distant alien world was known for its beauty, power, and perfect order. Tall crystal towers touched the clouds, and shining silver guards stood at every corner. But inside this grand palace, there was a problem no guard, no soldier, and no advisor could solve. The alien queen, the ruler of this world, had a little daughter. The princess was only 3 years old, but she had already made the palace a place of chaos. She was not bad, just wild, full of energy, curious, and unstoppable. She loved to climb everything, run through long halls, and hide in places where no one could find her. She laughed when she did something naughty, and when someone told her to stop, she would just smile and do it again. In just 2 short months, the queen had lost 15 nannies. The first nanny left crying after just 3 days. The second nanny stayed a week and then gave up. By the time the 5th nanny left, the queen had started to worry. By the 10th, she had lost hope. No one wanted to stay. Some caretakers packed their bags in the middle of the night. Others left without saying goodbye. The palace staff whispered quietly behind closed doors. "The princess is too much," they said. "She is sweet but too strong for anyone to handle." Every day someone new came in with a bright smile, and every week someone new left with tired eyes. The queen sat in her throne room, her long silver gown flowing around her. Her crown shone under the bright light, but her heart was heavy. She was known as a powerful ruler. She had made peace with other star systems. She had stopped wars. She could control armies with one command. But with her little daughter, she felt powerless. She had tried everything. She hired the best caretakers in her star system, highly trained professionals who had raised royal children before. She brought in gentle robotic nannies with soft voices and calm hands. She even tried 2 experienced alien nurses who had cared for dozens of royal children. None of them lasted long. The princess would run, scream with joy, and test their patience in every way. One evening, the queen walked into her daughter's room. The floor was covered with building blocks, drawings, and a half-eaten plate of fruit. Her daughter was sitting in the middle, smiling proudly at the mess she had made. A tired nanny stood at the door, shaking her head. "Your Majesty," she whispered, "I cannot do this anymore." And just like that, she left too. The little princess was not mean. She just wanted someone to understand her. She wanted someone who wouldn't scold her for being loud or curious. She wanted someone who would sit with her, talk to her, and see her as more than just a royal child. But no one stayed long enough to try. That night, the queen sat alone in her private chamber. The stars outside her window sparkled like tiny lights. She removed her crown and placed it on the table. For the first time in years, she felt truly tired. She had lost 15 nannies in 2 months. What would people say? That the queen who ruled galaxies could not control her own child? Her daughter's laughter echoed from down the hall. It was a sound she loved more than anything, but it also reminded her of the emptiness in her heart. She had lost her partner years ago. She raised her daughter alone while leading a kingdom. She wanted her little girl to feel loved and cared for, not just protected by guards or surrounded by fancy toys. The palace staff gathered the next morning. "We must find someone new," one advisor said. "Someone stronger," another added. "Or maybe a robot that can handle her energy." But the queen shook her head. She knew what her daughter needed wasn't just someone strong. She needed someone kind. Someone who didn't see her as a royal job. Someone who saw her as a child. That afternoon, the queen walked through the royal nursery. Toys were scattered everywhere. A small stuffed bear sat on a chair. The princess's shoes were on the wrong feet, and she was running around chasing a floating ball. She laughed loudly, full of life. The queen stopped at the doorway and just watched. The little princess ran up to her and tugged on her long dress. "Mama," she said with a sweet smile, "play with me." The queen knelt down and stroked her daughter's hair. In that moment, the strong, powerful ruler was just a mother. She picked up the little ball and rolled it back to her daughter. The princess clapped her small hands and laughed again. For a few minutes, the queen forgot her worries. She forgot About the nannies who left, the whispers in the palace and the pressure on her shoulders. It was just her and her child. But when the sun set, reality returned. She needed someone who would stay, someone who wouldn't run away after 3 days. She made a decision that night. She would open the nanny position, not just to the royal star system, but to the entire galaxy. Someone out there must exist who could care for her daughter with patience and warmth. She sent the request to the Royal Employment Board. Nanny needed for royal child, the message said. Must have a kind heart, strong patience, and love for children. All species welcome. The royal announcement spread across space. On planets far away, people saw the message. Most ignored it. Some laughed. No one can last in that palace, they said. 15 nannies in 2 months? Impossible. But somewhere on a small human colony, on a quiet corner of the galaxy, the message would soon reach a man who would change everything. A single father with a warm heart. Someone who didn't just see children as work, but as a gift. The queen didn't know it yet. The princess didn't know it either. But their lives were about to change in a way they never expected. That night, as the queen watched her daughter fall asleep hugging her stuffed bear, she whispered softly, "I will find the right one for you." For the first time in weeks, she felt a small spark of hope. She didn't know that the answer to her problem wouldn't come from a powerful alien or a royal nurse. It would come from a simple human man who had raised a little girl on his own, and who understood the language of love better than anyone in the galaxy. The stars above the palace glimmered brightly as if they too knew that something extraordinary was on its way. The queen closed her eyes and let herself believe, just a little, that things were about to change. And somewhere, far away, a single dad named Daniel would soon see a royal message that would lead him into the heart of a palace, a kingdom, and a small wild princess who simply needed someone to stay. Daniel sat in his small workshop on a quiet human colony, far away from the royal stars. The sound of his tools filled the room as he worked on an old starship engine. It was a simple life, not rich or fancy, but it was honest. Daniel had built this little shop with his own hands after losing his wife years ago. He spent his days fixing broken ships, helping travelers, and taking care of the most important person in his life, his little daughter, Lily. Lily was 7 years old. She had kind eyes and a smile that could brighten even the dullest day. She was the reason Daniel kept going. Every night they would sit together and eat simple meals. Every morning he would braid her hair before sending her to school. He wasn't rich, but he gave her love, and that made their small world warm and full of hope. One cool evening, while wiping grease from his hands, Daniel noticed something on the old hollow screen in the corner of his workshop. It was a glowing message, an announcement from the Royal Employment Board. Usually such messages were for high-level workers or galaxy travelers, not for people like him. Out of curiosity, he clicked it. The message read, "Nanny needed for royal child of the queen. Must have patience, kindness, and experience with children. All species welcome. Immediate placement. High reward." Daniel almost laughed. Him, a royal nanny? That was something he never imagined. But then as he read more, he noticed the details. The queen had lost 15 nannies in 2 months. The palace was desperate for someone who wouldn't give up. He leaned back in his chair. He didn't have a perfect life. His job was tiring, money was always short, and raising Lily alone was never easy. But he knew how to care for children. He had spent years learning how to be patient, how to listen, how to love without conditions. "Daddy?" Lily asked, stepping into the room, holding her favorite blanket. "Why are you looking at the screen like that?" Daniel smiled gently. "Oh, it's nothing," he said. "Just some fancy job offer for someone who knows how to take care of kids." She climbed onto his lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "You take care of me," she said proudly. "You're the best at it." Her words hit him deep in the heart. Maybe it wasn't impossible. Maybe what the palace needed wasn't someone perfect. Maybe they just needed someone real. Still, he doubted. "I'm just a simple man," he thought. "Why would they ever pick me?" But something inside him whispered that he should at least try. The next day, after sending Lily to school, Daniel opened the official application. It asked about his experience. He typed carefully, telling the truth. that he had raised his daughter alone since she was 2, that he worked with families in his neighborhood, and that he understood children better than machines. Then he clicked submit. He didn't expect anything to happen. But only 3 days later, a silver royal shuttle landed in front of his tiny workshop. The entire neighborhood came out to see it. The shuttle was polished and shining like a star. Royal guards stepped out in dark uniforms. One of them walked toward Daniel and handed him a scroll with a golden seal. "Mr. Daniel Carter," the guard said politely, "the Royal Palace has accepted your application." Daniel froze. "Wait, what?" "You have been chosen to meet the Queen and care for the young princess," the guard continued. "Pack your belongings." "Departure is in 2 days," the neighbors gasped. Some whispered in surprise. Others laughed softly. "A human. Going to work for the Queen?" one man muttered. "He won't last a week." Daniel ignored the whispers. He looked at Lily, who stood beside him, her eyes wide with excitement. "Daddy," she whispered, "are we going to a palace?" Daniel knelt down to her level and brushed her hair back. "Yes, sweetheart," he said softly. "We're going to try something new. Something big." That night he couldn't sleep. He lay awake staring at the ceiling. He thought about the risk. He thought about the palace, the Queen, the princess, and the long list of nannies who had already failed. He wasn't rich or powerful. He didn't have fancy clothes or royal manners. But he had one thing the others may not have had: a heart that never gave up on a child. The morning before their departure, Daniel packed their few belongings: some clothes, a family photo, Lily's favorite blanket, and a small wooden star his wife had carved before she passed away. Lily ran around excitedly, talking about the palace, the stars, and how she would meet the princess. When the royal shuttle lifted off from the human colony, Daniel held Lily's hand tightly. She pressed her face against the window, amazed at the stars shining outside. The journey took them across star systems. They passed glowing planets, giant ships, and long star tunnels. It felt unreal to Daniel. He had spent years living a quiet, simple life, and now he was flying to meet a queen. When the shuttle finally entered the royal planet's orbit, the view made his breath catch. The palace was even more beautiful than the hollow pictures. It stood tall, with towers of crystal and soft golden lights glowing like a dream. The shuttle landed on a clean landing pad surrounded by gardens. Royal guards were lined up. A tall woman in a royal uniform approached them. She looked serious but not unkind. "Mr. Daniel Carter," she greeted. "I am Captain Rena, head of palace security. Welcome to the royal palace. Please follow me." Lily held her father's hand tightly as they walked through the large gates. Daniel's boots echoed on the marble floor. Everything was bigger than he had ever imagined. The hallways, the windows, even the paintings on the walls. But what caught his attention the most was the silence. It didn't feel like a happy home, it felt lonely. They were taken to a grand room where the Queen was waiting. She was sitting on a high seat wearing a long silver gown. Her presence was strong, but her eyes were tired, the kind of tired that only a parent could understand. Daniel bowed his head slightly. He didn't know the royal customs, but he tried to be respectful. The Queen spoke with a calm but serious voice. "You know what this job means," she said. "You've read the file." "Yes, Your Majesty," Daniel replied softly. 15 people have tried and left. The Queen continued. "My daughter is full of energy. I don't want a servant. I need someone who won't give up on her. Can you do that?" Daniel looked up, meeting her eyes. "I can't promise to be perfect," he said honestly, "but I can promise I'll never walk away from a child who needs someone to stay." For the first time, a small spark appeared in the Queen's tired eyes. She nodded slowly. "Then we shall see." Daniel and Lily were taken to their new rooms near the royal nursery. Lily jumped on the soft bed, laughing at how big it was. Daniel walked to the window and looked out at the shining towers. Far below, in another part of the palace, the little princess was running wild again, chasing a floating ball, climbing furniture, and making her maid sigh in exhaustion. She had no idea that someone very different had just arrived, and Daniel didn't know it yet. But he was about to face the biggest test of his life, not with machines or engines, but with a small alien child who needed a father's heart, more than a nanny's rules. The palace that once felt cold was about to change. And so was his life. Daniel stood in front of the royal nursery door the next morning. His heart was beating fast, not from fear of the queen or the palace guards, but from something much simpler, the unknown. Behind that door was the little princess who had made 15 nannies leave in only 2 months. He wasn't a soldier or a trained royal caretaker. He was just a single dad who loved children and believed in patience. Captain Rena, the palace guard, stopped beside him. "Good luck," she said in a calm but serious voice. No one lasted more than a week. Daniel smiled nervously. "We'll see," he whispered. As the heavy door slid open, Daniel saw the room for the first time. It was huge. Soft white light filled the space. Toys floated in the air. Colorful stars blinked on the ceiling, and small robot assistants tried to keep order. But there was no order. The princess was standing on top of a small table, wearing her tiny royal boots the wrong way around, waving a pillow like it was a sword. She had soft golden hair, small shiny eyes, and a mischievous smile. A tired maid stood at a distance, not daring to come closer. The princess spotted Daniel and tilted her head. "Who are you?" she asked in a sharp little voice. Daniel walked slowly toward her. "Hi there," he said gently. "My name is Daniel." "You're not like the others," she said, narrowing her eyes. "No," Daniel answered honestly. "I'm just me." She raised her little chin. "You'll run away too," she said proudly. As if it was a game she already knew how to win. Daniel chuckled softly. "Maybe," he said. "But let's see first." Suddenly the princess threw the pillow at him. It hit his shoulder and bounced to the floor. The maid gasped. Daniel didn't shout or get angry. Instead, he bent down, picked up the pillow, and gently tossed it back to her. For a second, she didn't know what to do. All the other nannies had scolded her. None of them had played along. "You're supposed to say, 'Stop that,'" she said, confused. "I don't want to," Daniel said simply. "I'd rather play with you." She stared at him, surprised. Then a tiny smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She hummed, jumping off the table and grabbing the pillow. "Okay then." For the next hour, Daniel didn't try to control her. He didn't give her long royal rules. He simply followed her lead. They built towers out of blocks, knocked them down, and laughed together. She tried to climb a chair, and instead of pulling her away, Daniel stood beside her to keep her from falling. When she ran to hide behind the curtain, Daniel pretended to search the whole room dramatically. She giggled so loudly that even the maids standing outside the door were surprised. It was the first time in a long while anyone had heard the princess laugh like that. But not everything was easy. In the afternoon, she tried to test him again. She threw her toys on the floor and crossed her arms. "Pick them up," she said in a bossy little voice. Daniel sat on the floor beside the toys. "We can clean together," he said. She frowned. "No one tells me to clean." "I'm the princess," Daniel nodded slowly. "That's true," he said. "But even princesses can help. When I was a kid, I helped my dad clean up my toys. He told me it made me brave." Her little eyes softened for a second. No one had ever talked to her like that. Most people just did what she wanted because she was royal. "Brave?" she whispered. "Very brave," Daniel said with a kind smile. She bent down, picked up a small block, and placed it in the basket. Daniel clapped quietly. She blushed and picked up another. Before long, they had cleaned the room together. Later that day, Daniel read her a story from his small hollow book. It wasn't a royal story. It was an old earth tale about a little girl who explored forests with her dog. The princess listened with wide eyes, hugging her stuffed bear. No one had ever read her stories like that before. Usually the palace staff read from official royal books with strict voices. Daniel's voice was soft, warm, and full of life. The queen stood quietly at the doorway. She had come to see if the new human would give up like the others, but what she saw surprised her. Her daughter was sitting calmly, her head leaning against Daniel's arm, listening to the story. She wasn't throwing things or shouting. She was smiling. A feeling she hadn't felt in a long time filled the queen's heart. Hope. The next morning, the princess decided to test Daniel again. She hid under her bed before he entered the room. She wanted to scare him away. When Daniel walked in, he noticed right away she was missing. Instead of panicking, he sat down on the floor and pretended to cry loudly. "Oh no," he said dramatically. "The princess is gone. I guess I'll have to eat all these cookies alone." A tiny laugh came from under the bed. He continued, "I'll have to tell the queen that I can't find her daughter, and I'll have to eat dessert without sharing." Suddenly, the princess jumped out from under the bed and shouted, "No! I want cookies." Daniel burst out laughing, and she joined him. From that moment, something changed inside her. She started looking forward to seeing him. She followed him around the palace garden, asked him questions about Earth, and even let him teach her how to tie her shoelaces. The palace staff couldn't believe their eyes. The same little girl who used to make Nannies cry was now holding Daniel's hand as they walked. Daniel never raised his voice at her. He never ran away when she got upset. When she cried over small things, he simply sat beside her and waited. Slowly, she learned that she didn't have to fight for attention. She already had it. One afternoon, while Daniel and the princess were sitting in the garden blowing bubbles, Captain Rena passed by. She whispered to another guard, "He's still here." I can't believe it. But Daniel didn't do anything magical. He simply listened, played, and cared. That night, when Daniel returned to his room, Lily was waiting for him. She had made friends with some of the palace children, but she still missed their small home. "Daddy?" Lily asked softly. "Do you like it here?" Daniel nodded. "I think we're meant to be here for a reason," he said. "The princess needs someone to stay." Lily smiled sleepily. "You're good at staying," she said. Daniel tucked her in and sat by the window looking at the palace lights. For the first time since he arrived, he felt a quiet warmth. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was becoming something deeper. In another part of the palace, the queen tucked her daughter into bed. The princess hugged her stuffed bear and whispered, "Mama, Daniel is funny. He doesn't leave like the others." The queen stroked her daughter's hair gently. "Is that so?" she said softly. The princess nodded with sleepy eyes. "I like him." When the queen stepped out of the room, she found herself smiling without realizing it. For months, her palace had felt cold and heavy, but now it was changing. Daniel had only been there a few days, but the walls already felt warmer. The laughter of her daughter had returned, and for a queen who carried the weight of a galaxy on her shoulders, that meant everything. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this time he'll stay." And as the stars shone outside the palace, Daniel slept with a calm heart, unaware that he was slowly becoming more than just a nanny. He was becoming part of a story that would change all their lives. The palace had never been so full of laughter. It echoed through the long crystal halls, bounced off the golden walls, and made the guards exchange surprised glances. The little princess who once scared every nanny away was now smiling every day. The reason was simple: Daniel. He didn't try to control her. He didn't fear her temper. He treated her like a child, not like a problem. Weeks had passed since Daniel arrived. Each day, the bond between him and the princess grew stronger. In the mornings, they played in the royal gardens, blowing bubbles or chasing the floating butterfly drones. In the afternoons, they read Earth stories under the shade of the tall silver trees. At night, Daniel tucked her into bed with gentle words that made her feel safe. The queen noticed everything. From her balcony, she often stood quietly watching them. For years, she had carried the heavy weight of ruling her empire alone. Her heart had grown tired. But seeing her daughter laugh again filled a part of her that she thought was gone forever. Daniel was different from the others. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't afraid of failure. He simply cared. One day, a small but meaningful moment changed everything. It happened during a warm afternoon in the royal garden. The princess was running through the flowers, chasing a small glowing butterfly drone. She laughed loudly, calling Daniel to follow her. He pretended to be slow, making her giggle more. But then, as she ran down the small hill, she tripped on a root and fell hard onto the grass. A loud cry broke the air. The guards panicked and rushed forward, but Daniel was already there. He knelt beside her, gently lifting her into his arms. Her little knees were scraped and tears rolled down her cheeks. The guard stood stiff, unsure how to react, but Daniel's voice was calm and warm. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe. I've got you." The princess held on to him tightly, her small hands gripping his shirt. She wasn't used to this kind of comfort. Usually when she cried, people rushed to clean, fix, or panic. No one had ever just held her. Daniel took out a small cloth from his pocket, wiped the dirt from her knees, and blew on the scrape softly, like he used to do for Lily when she was small. "You're brave," he told her. "Even strong princesses can cry. Crying doesn't make you weak. It means you care," she sniffled, looking at him with watery eyes. No one had ever said those words to her before. She rested her head on his chest and slowly stopped crying. From the balcony, the queen watched the whole scene. Something inside her heart melted. It wasn't just that Daniel comforted her daughter. It was the way he did it, with a quiet strength, the kind only a real father has. Later that evening, the Queen invited Daniel to a small dinner. It was the first time since he arrived that she had spoken to him outside of work. He wore his simple, clean clothes, feeling a little nervous. Lily sat beside him, looking around with curious eyes. The royal dining room was grand, with tall windows, candles, and golden plates. The Queen sat across from them. She didn't wear her full crown tonight, just a soft silver band. Her face looked calmer than before. "You have done something no one else could," she said gently. "You've given my daughter a reason to smile again." Daniel lowered his eyes respectfully. "She doesn't need someone special," he said quietly. "She just needs someone to be there and not leave." The Queen's heart softened even more at his words. For years, everyone around her had spoken to her like she was only a queen. Daniel spoke to her like she was a person, a mother. As they ate together, the princess sat between them, happily telling stories about their garden adventures. Lily listened and laughed too. For the first time in a long time, the dining room didn't feel cold and formal. It felt like a family meal. From that night, the Queen started joining them in small moments. Sometimes she would watch them play. Sometimes she would sit quietly beside them while Daniel read bedtime stories. Slowly, without forcing it, something gentle grew between them. But the palace was still full of people who didn't trust easily. Some royal advisors whispered in the halls. "He's just a human," they said. "He doesn't belong here. He's not trained for royal life." The Queen heard their whispers, but she didn't respond. Deep down, she knew what they couldn't see. Daniel wasn't just a nanny. He was a light that had returned warmth to her home. One night, a small storm swept over the royal planet. Lightning flashed outside the palace windows and loud thunder filled the halls. The little princess, usually full of energy, curled up in her bed, scared of the noise. Daniel walked into her room without hesitation. He sat down beside her, wrapped her in a warm blanket, and held her hand. "Storms can be loud," he whispered softly, "but they always pass." She looked at him with big eyes. "Will it go away soon?" "Yes," Daniel smiled gently. "Storms can't last forever. You're safe here." She leaned against him, listening to his calm heartbeat. For the first time, she didn't cry during a storm. She felt protected. The Queen stood in the doorway again. She didn't interrupt. She simply watched Daniel sitting there, his strong but gentle presence making everything feel safe. Later, when the storm passed and the princess was asleep, the Queen stepped into the hallway where Daniel stood. "She trusts you," the Queen said quietly. Daniel nodded. "She's a wonderful child," he replied. "She just needed someone to listen." The Queen looked at him carefully. She saw a man who had known pain, who had raised his own child, who didn't wear any royal armor but carried quiet strength. For years, she had built walls around herself, but slowly this simple human man was breaking them, not with power but with kindness. Over the next few days, the Queen found herself talking to Daniel more often. They shared short conversations about their children, their lives, their small daily struggles. She told him stories about her daughter's first steps, and Daniel shared how Lily used to sing songs before bed. These were not royal meetings. These were human moments. The staff started to notice something different. The Queen, once distant and cold, now smiled more. The princess laughed every day. The palace felt alive again. One evening, Daniel took both Lily and the princess to the garden to watch the stars. The two girls lay side by side on the soft grass, pointing at the glowing sky. The Queen quietly joined them, sitting beside Daniel. For a long time, they said nothing. They just watched the stars together. The Queen turned to Daniel and said softly, "Thank you. You didn't just help my daughter. You brought back light to my heart, too." Daniel didn't know how to answer. He just gave a small smile. At that moment, under the endless night sky, the Queen realized something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Daniel was not just a helper. He was becoming part of their lives in a way no one else ever had. And Daniel, for the first time since his wife passed away, felt something warm blooming quietly inside him. A new beginning. The storm had passed. The palace no longer felt heavy and cold. It had changed in ways no one expected. The laughter of the little princess filled every hallway. The soft sound of children's footsteps replaced the old silence, and in the center of it all was Daniel, the human single dad who had arrived with nothing but a kind heart and gentle patience. 2 months had passed since Daniel came to the royal palace. The queen could hardly believe the transformation. Her daughter, once known as the Little Storm, now woke up every morning with a smile. She ran through the palace gardens not in wild chaos but with joy. She played with Lily as if they had been sisters forever, and at night she slept peacefully, holding her stuffed bear and waiting for Daniel's bedtime story. The queen often watched from a distance. She had grown used to seeing this gentle human man with her daughter. Every time Daniel knelt down to tie the princess's shoes or sat on the floor to play with her, something warm grew inside the queen's chest. She had spent years being strong for everyone else, never letting anyone see how lonely she felt. But now, when she heard her daughter's laughter, it was as if a light had returned to her heart. The people of the palace noticed the change too. The guards smiled more. The maids moved with ease. Even the strict royal advisors had stopped whispering doubts about Daniel. No one could deny what they saw every day. The queen was happier, and her daughter had found someone she trusted completely. One morning, the princess ran into the queen's room with messy hair and sleepy eyes. "Mama," she said with excitement, "Daniel is making pancakes!" The queen raised an eyebrow. "Pancakes?" "Yes," the little girl said, jumping on the soft royal bed. "He says it's a special earth breakfast. And Lily is helping." The queen followed her daughter to the royal kitchen. The royal cook stood around watching with surprise as Daniel flipped pancakes in the air, while Lily handed him ingredients. The princess sat on a tall chair, her hands covered in flour, giggling as she tried to help. When the queen walked in, Daniel greeted her with his warm, simple smile. "Good morning, Your Majesty," he said politely. The princess ran to her mother, holding a slightly misshapen pancake like it was a treasure. "Mama, try it." The queen hesitated at first, but then took a small bite. It wasn't fancy like royal meals. It was soft, warm, and sweet. It tasted like home, a feeling she hadn't had in a very long time. That morning became something special. Every week after that, they shared pancake breakfast together. It wasn't just food. It was family. Over time, the princess grew closer to Daniel, not because of rules or duty, but because of love. When she fell, she ran to him. When she laughed, she wanted him to hear it. When she learned something new, she wanted to show him first. To her, Daniel wasn't just a nanny. He was the father figure she never had. The queen noticed how naturally Daniel had become part of their lives. He didn't demand anything. He didn't act like he belonged to the royal world. He simply stayed. He became their steady center. One night, the queen walked into the royal garden alone. The stars were bright above, and the cool wind moved gently through the trees. She saw Daniel sitting on a bench, looking up at the sky. He didn't see her at first. She slowly walked toward him. "You like the stars," she said softly. Daniel turned and smiled. "Yes," he replied. "When I was a child, I used to look at the sky with my father. It made me feel like there was something bigger out there, something kind." The queen sat beside him. For a moment, they were both silent. There were no guards, no royal titles, no duties. Just two people who had carried heavy lives, now sitting under the same night sky. "I never thought I'd see my daughter this happy again," the queen said quietly. "For so long, I tried to control everything. I forgot what she really needed." Daniel's voice was calm. "All children need love. That's something no amount of power or technology can replace." She looked at him carefully, her heart feeling something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, a quiet warmth. The next few days passed quickly. The princess began calling Daniel Papa Daniel when she was excited. She ran between him and the queen like a child who finally had both parents. The queen didn't correct her. She only smiled. One afternoon, a small festival was held at the palace. The royal square was filled with lights, music, and laughter. The princess wore a soft pink dress, and Lily wore a matching blue one. Daniel held both their hands as they walked through the crowd. The queen followed close behind, wearing a simple gown, not her heavy royal robe. She wanted to feel free, too. The princess proudly showed Daniel the glowing lantern she made. "Look," she said, lifting it up. "It's like the stars." Daniel knelt down and smiled. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." When the lanterns were released into the night sky, the queen and Daniel stood side by side, watching hundreds of soft lights float upward. The princess and Lily hugged each other, their faces glowing with joy. The queen whispered, "You've given her something no one else could give." Daniel looked at the lanterns. I didn't do anything special, he said softly. I just stayed, but the queen knew it was more than that. His presence had filled their empty spaces with warmth. As the weeks turned into months, Daniel's role in the palace became more than a job. The royal staff no longer called him the nanny. They called him the guardian. The princess trusted him with everything. Lily had found a new friend and a big, safe home, and the queen. She had found someone who understood her not as a ruler, but as a woman, as a mother. One evening, after the girls had fallen asleep, Daniel was about to return to his room when he saw the queen waiting in the hallway. She wasn't wearing her crown. Her hair was loose and her eyes were gentle. "Daniel," she said softly. "Thank you." "For what?" he asked. "For staying," she replied. "For seeing my daughter. For seeing me." He didn't know what to say, but his kind smile said enough. The princess, once known for chasing away every nanny, now slept peacefully every night. The queen, once known as a powerful but distant ruler, now smiled every day. And Daniel, once a single father fixing ships in a small corner of the galaxy, had found a new home he never expected. He had arrived as a stranger. But now he was family. Under the same stars that watched his journey begin, Daniel finally understood that love doesn't always come from where you expect. Sometimes it finds you in a royal palace, through the laughter of a little girl and the quiet smile of a queen who had waited too long to feel warm again. And so the palace became more than a place of power. It became a home, a real one, a place where a queen, a princess, a human father, and two little girls could build something beautiful, something that would last far beyond one job or one season. It all began the day the queen lost 15 nannies in 2 months. And it ended with one kind man who chose not to leave.